hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. The new leader of Turning Point USA just named, as the new debate in Washington centers around Jimmy Kimmel. What the biggest names in politics are saying tonight. The president, by the way, on his way home from the UK and making a very big admission about Vladimir Putin.
The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but he's let me down. He's really let me down.
Did you hear that? Mick Mulvaney joins us later tonight. He'll tell us what the commander-in-chief is likely to do next. Also tonight, she wanted to be the next commander-in-chief. Why Kamala Harris is now revealing she actually didn't prefer, she says, Tim Walz to be her running mate. Plus, D.C., Chicago, Memphis, we've even heard Baltimore, right? But is another major American city being left out of the conversation? Why one Republican lawmaker is telling his Republican governor to call the National Guard in to Cleveland. But first tonight, here from the Hill, Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA names its new leader as lawmakers here in Washington launch into a new debate involving Jimmy Kimmel. Erica Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk, now named as the CEO and chairwoman of Turning Point USA, just 1 week after her husband was assassinated. Our Alex Capriello live in a moment on why that organization says that is the move it made for its future. But first to our Joe Khalil, live in the halls of the Capitol as Joe, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and President Trump all weighing in today on ABC's decision to bench Jimmy Kimmel, right?
Yeah, them and a ton of people weighing in today, Blake, and basically it falls along party lines. Conservatives, Republicans today saying that Jimmy Kimmel essentially got what he deserved. They say he mischaracterized intentionally Charlie Kirk's assassin. They say it was insensitive, it was inappropriate, and President Trump said this may not even be the last shoe to drop here. Take a listen.
They're 97% against. They give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It will be up to Brendan Carr. I think Brendan Carr is outstanding. He's a patriot. He loves our country, and he's a tough guy.
Blake, on the other side today, Democrats have basically called this cancel culture, and they said that they are concerned that it wasn't Disney or their values that ultimately led to Kimmel being suspended, but rather pressure from Brendan Carr and from the FCC. And they say if that's actually the case, then that's where they draw the line at government sort of deciding what comedians can and cannot say. Listen to the Democratic leaders today.
Using the tragic death of Charlie Kirk as an excuse to supercharge a political witch hunt against critics is abhorrent, obnoxious, and as un-American as it gets.
Blake, some Democrats say if they win the midterms, there are going to be investigations into Brendan Carr. Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, Republican, says he knows Carr and there would be no need to even subpoena him. He says Carr would come in voluntarily and testify if they ask.
Our Joe Khalil, live tonight up on Capitol Hill. Joe, thank you. Meanwhile, the company that Charlie Kirk started 13 years ago when he was just 18 years old, Turning Point USA, has a new leader tonight. His wife, Erica. That announcement coming just days before tens of thousands are expected to attend Kirk's memorial service in Arizona. Our Alex Capriello has the very latest for us tonight out west. Alex?
Yeah, the folks at Turning Point USA referenced several conversations that they say Charlie Kirk had with other organization executives where he expressly stated that if anything, God forbid, should ever happen to him, that he wanted his wife, Erica Kirk, to take the reins and take it to the promised land, so to speak. And Erica Kirk is promising to do just that on behalf of Charlie and everything that he spent his entire life building up to do. She said so much in an audience address to a massive audience in the days after Kirk's funeral, also speaking, in a way, directly to him. Take a listen.
Charlie, I promise I will never let your legacy die, baby. I won't. I promise I'll make Turning Point USA the biggest thing that this nation has ever seen. I promise.
And Erica Kirk will continue that legacy by speaking at Charlie Kirk's funeral on Sunday, speaking alongside as well President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. The fact that those two, along with other Trump cabinet members, will be in attendance is the reason that we're going to see heightened security at State Farm Stadium right there in Glendale, Arizona. The Department of Public Safety is issuing this, and they're calling it a SEER Level 1 event, which is a designation used for events of the highest national significance, which allows the most federal resources when it comes to law enforcement to be activated. As for the outside, that's up to Glendale PD. They're also activating several hundreds officers as well. Like,
and as you can see behind Alex, still more than a week after this assassination, folks there in Utah showing up to that memorial. Our Alex Capriello live tonight with the latest there. Alex, thank you. Joining us now, the Republican congressman from the great state of North Carolina, Congressman Mark Harris, a Republican, back with us once again here on the Hill. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight. The news coming out of Turning Point USA today that Erica Kirk will now lead that organization. The organization saying that Charlie Kirk had planned this in case there was the God forbid. I wonder what you make of where Turning Point USA is able to take things from here with Erica Kirk now at the helm.
Well, first of all, Blake, thank you for having me on this evening. And listen, I think this is a stellar decision by the board and all of those that were involved, following through on Charlie's desires that he had stated. But even more than that, Erica has proven herself already. The poise that she demonstrated in days just after the political assassination, how she was able to take to the microphone and share the vision, share the passion that she had for what a difference this ministry really and this movement had brought was absolutely phenomenal. And I think that when you see what's happening across the country, listen, this has been the awakening of a sleeping giant, perhaps, that I'm really beginning to see take shape back in my district and across the country.
I know that you were miking up for us, Congressman, so you might not have heard what Chuck Schumer had to say as the ongoing debate around Jimmy Kimmel continues. He said using the tragic death of Kirk as an excuse to supercharge the political whip is abhorrent, obnoxious, and as un-American as it gets. Here was the Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, today. He said of the decision and Brendan Carr, quote, he has disgraced the office he holds by bullying ABC, the employer of Jimmy Kimmel, and forcing the company to bend the knee to the Trump administration. Brendan Carr, Hakeem Jeffries says, should resign immediately. What would your response be to the two Democratic leaders up there in Washington on the Hill?
Well, I would simply say to them that they don't think much of ABC or they don't think of the people that made this decision. But I have to think that this was a business decision as much as anything. When you look at ratings that are falling, when you look at really the public that has repudiated in many ways the kind of leadership that Kimmel has seemed to produce. I mean, I don't watch the show and haven't watched it and don't know that much about it. But I would say that when I see the statements that he's made and the way he has carried himself, the American people with ratings have a way of speaking. And I think that when companies have to make decisions, they're oftentimes business decisions. We saw something happen earlier with another late night program as well. So I think that you've got to allow these companies to do what they need to do. And I think that's what took place in this situation.
Congressman, one of the reactions from President Trump in the recent days is he says he's going to label Antifa as a major terrorist organization, as he put it. Christopher Wray, who was the first FBI director, as you know, that President Trump put into that role, had described Antifa as an ideology, no known leader. When you go to the FBI's website, which of course is run by the Trump administration, it talks about terrorism being defined both domestically and internationally as violent and criminal acts. Foreign terrorist organizations, for example, on the State Department website, they talk about actual terrorist attacks. And the president was asked today essentially what he's going after when he was aboard Air Force One. This is what he said, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
When they don't have defined leadership or membership, how do you target them? Antifa.
We're going to find out, right? We're going to see. People have been talking about it for a long time.
He really didn't have an answer there, Congressman, so I wonder if you think this is something worth pursuing.
Well, I do think it's something worth pursuing because obviously the president has continued to carry out his commitment to be a law and order president. Listen, I was pastor of First Baptist Church, Charlotte, North Carolina, and I saw the riots in Charlotte in 2016, and I saw the kind of things that took place. I saw the National Guard having to be called out. And so very much so, these groups that are organized like this are the reason that we see the crime that has come to many of our downtown areas. And so I think to recognize that and to call it out is probably a very wise move.
Is there a line, though, between calling it out and then labeling as terrorists?
Well, I think that in order to certainly call it what it is, and it was certainly terrorism when they were lighting fires on the highways and blocking traffic and continuing to march through the streets. And again, the National Guard having to be called out. What I witnessed with my own eyes there in downtown Charlotte with buildings and being hit and glass being broken out, all of those kind of things, hurting businesses and everything else in downtown, I certainly think there is a time to call it out for what it is.
Okay. All right. We'll leave it there. Congressman Mark Harris, Republican from the Tar Heel State, once again with us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right. Still to come tonight over the next 50 minutes or so. The crime crackdown. Which city is the National Guard headed next potentially? I'm going to speak to a Republican congressman who is asking his fellow Republican governor to bring in the Guard. Why is that not happening? That's live on the other side, plus this.
But he's let me down. He's really let me down.
President Trump on the world stage expressing those comments toward Vladimir Putin. Did he get played by the Russian president? Where does the president go from here? Mick Mulvaney with us in moments. And did you see what Kamala Harris said about her 2024 bid? Who she says she actually wanted to run alongside with her. So why didn't she pick that person? I'm Blake Berman. We're back in 4 minutes. I'll see you on the other side. On NewsNation, the president landing back in the United States tonight after a state visit to the United Kingdom, receiving a royal welcome there, as you see there, from the King and the Queen, holding meetings with the Prime Minister as well. On Air Force One today, on the way back, the president addressing an issue closer to home, his crime crackdown in America's cities.
In D.C., we took one of the most dangerous cities in the world. And you can walk down, you can take your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whoever you want to take. You can take them out to dinner tonight in D.C. and you're going to be safe. It's really safe. We did a great job. We're going to do the same job in Memphis, and we're going to Chicago.
But could the administration be eyeing other major cities as well? For example, last night, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, in Michigan, suggested Detroit as a possibility.
My one message to Gretchen Whitmer is, look, the city of Detroit, we know, has got some serious crime problems, and we know that it's the people in Detroit who suffer the most when crime is allowed to run rampant all over city streets. Gretchen, we are happy to send the National Guard to Detroit, Michigan. All you got to do is ask.
But one city you might not have heard yet, Cleveland, Ohio. In terms of violent crime per capita, it's actually more dangerous than Chicago, according to stats. Violent crime in Cleveland, for example, the 5th highest in the country. For homicides, it's number 6. And for property crime, it's just outside the top 10, ranking 12th. The Republican congressman, one of them there in Ohio, Max Miller, now wants National Guard troops in Cleveland. Writing in a new op-ed, I'm calling on the governor, Mike DeWine, to authorize the deployment of the Ohio National Guard to Cleveland. This is a temporary measure, but a necessary one, he writes. And the congressman there from Ohio, Max Miller, with us tonight here on the Hill. First time, I believe, maybe. Congressman, thanks for being with us this evening. So explain, what do you want? I know you want the National Guard. What do you expect that to maybe look like? And why do you think the governor hasn't done it?
Blake, thank you for having me on. It really is an honor to talk about an issue that I care very deeply about and why. A few weeks ago, a young woman was murdered, slain on a train in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I became a father almost 2 years ago. And when I looked into that woman's eyes, And when I saw how frightened she was in her last moments, I felt that it was my duty to look around the areas that I represent, not just the areas that I represent, but the areas that surround where I represent, and that is Cleveland, Ohio. The entire district that I represent is the vast majority of the Cuyahoga suburbs. And when I found out and did my research that 7 individuals are murdered a month in the city of Cleveland, I had to do something when no one else is. And for calling for the Ohio National Guard on Governor Mike DeWine and for Mayor Justin Bibb to call on the governor to do so because of home rule in the state of Ohio, it's the right thing to do. I believe that no one should be murdered and that we can do better and that this is a choice and that this is a choice that we can make to end today. It's working in Washington, D.C. It will work in Memphis, and it can work in Cleveland, Ohio.
In Cincinnati, as I understand it, the governor, Mike DeWine, has been using the highway patrol there, and he says that's been successful. Could that be a model in other cities, or does that fall short?
Look, that could be a model, but I'm just going to tell you, the city of Cleveland has lost 87 officers within the last several months. And over the last few years, the city of Cleveland has lost more than 200 officers. What we need is more of a presence and a deterrence and an assistance in cities like Cleveland, in cities like Cincinnati, in cities like Detroit, like Vice President Vance said. And these mayors and these governors should be requesting them. And let's be clear, where are these cities? They are all Democrat, liberal-run cities who have repeat offenders running the streets. I'm just saying the quiet part out loud, and I know my constituents are proud of me for doing the right thing and calling to action when others won't.
If you say this is the right thing, I guess the other side of that is Mike DeWine doing the wrong thing. You're a Republican. He's a Republican governor. Why do you think he hasn't gone here?
Well, we've talked to the governor and we've talked to the governor's team about this, and he is on board with the Ohio National Guard, as he has already sent the Ohio National Guard to Washington, D.C. for President Trump's request. He wants the mayor of the city of Cleveland to call on the National Guard because of home rule to make that request. I've spoken with the governor. He's very supportive of it. We're just waiting for the mayor to do the right thing, which is pick up the phone, make the call, and work with us moving forward. And I can tell you this, Blake, Mayor Muriel Bowser didn't want the National Guard in Washington, D.C. I can tell you what, there are many comments right now where she is praising the National Guard for being in Washington, D.C., because she hasn't had a murder here in just about a month, and that's absolutely historic, and I know we can do the same in Cleveland, Ohio.
Max Miller represents the area there with us tonight here on the Hill. I know you got to run, Congressman, so we'll leave it there. Thanks for being with us. We'll do it again soon.
Thanks, Blake. Looking forward to it.
Of course. All right, with me now, co-host of Rising on the Hill, NewsNation contributor as well, Lindsey Granger, and former Trump White House Cabinet Secretary Bill McGinley. Hello to you both. Thanks
How's it going?
for being here. Good. Bill, I'm going to start with you. It was interesting because at the end, to my last question there, right? You're a Republican. The governor's a Republican. Ohio's basically straight red right now at a federal and state level. But as I heard it there from the congressman, if the mayor doesn't want to budge, then maybe they have an issue with bringing in the National Guard. And is that kind of the issue here for President Trump, which is unless you got red across the board, you got issues?
I mean, it's part of it, right? Because, compliments to Max Miller, the congressman who's trying to help his constituents. They're traveling into Cleveland. He wants them to be safe. The friends and family and the small businesses that suffer under the yoke of crime in these big cities really need relief. And I think the issue that's highlighted there is that Cleveland is a blue city. It has Democratic leadership. The governor has requested that the mayor request the National Guard in or a surge of state resources to help suppress the crime rate there. If he doesn't give it, there may be some emergency powers that the governor can exercise to go ahead and deploy those resources to try and bring crime under control.
I wonder how many more Max Millers we're going to see.
I just feel like we have to just remember that it's a violation of the Constitution and a state's sovereignty to just send federal troops in there when it's non-emergency. And I know that President Trump likes to call everything an emergency because crime is up, but even in Detroit, their crime is down. And so it's just like when you're picking and choosing where to use this excessive power, it's not only militarizing cities, but it's creating an uncomfortable environment where perhaps people there don't want to see the National Guard in their city. Perhaps the mayor there wants to find a long-term solution that requires community policing or working with local officials.
Do you think we see more of these cases?
I mean, I think that
Max Miller's coming out and saying, let's go, let's do this.
I think that people are going to push back because I think there's a better long-term solution, and what we're doing in D.C. is a Band-Aid.
Democrats have had decades to find a solution. They failed to do it. President Trump and a lot of these Republican governors are ready to act to protect their citizens. So I hope that more Max Millers come to the forefront and make this request.
Bill, Lindsay, catch you later in the show. Appreciate it. Still to come tonight. Other side of the break and here on the Hill. Remember when President Trump, of course you do, rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin? Feels like years ago, right? Nope, just a month ago. But oh, how things have changed. What the president said today about Putin. In Washington tonight at a joint news conference with the British Prime Minister. Today, President Trump making some pretty big headlines, maybe a little bit of an admission, perhaps, when it came to this comment on Vladimir Putin.
He has let me down. I mean, he's killing many people, and he's losing more people than he's killing. I mean, frankly, the Russian soldiers are being killed at a higher rate than the Ukrainian soldiers.
He's let me down, the president says. The comments come as fighting escalates between Russia and Ukraine. In the last 24 hours, a Russian bomb dropping, killing 5 people in eastern Ukraine. Russian drones also destroying a private building and a home. Ukraine fighting back with attacks of its own, striking a Russian oil refinery overnight. Of course, all of this comes just a little over a month since the president quite literally rolled out the red carpet for the Russian leader during their summit in Alaska. The hope then, a peace deal or a ceasefire or something between Russia and Ukraine. But since then, we haven't seen any sort of progress really toward that. So the question tonight, among many, has Putin let Trump down, or is there something much bigger than that? Joining me now, retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert and former Trump Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor Mick Mulvaney with me now. Hello to you both. Mick, I'm going to start with you. You think that your old boss, the President of the United States, has made a big miscalculation here. What do you mean?
Yeah, I do. I think every human being has a tendency to do this. I think he thinks that Putin sees the world the same way that he does. Donald Trump doesn't like war. He really doesn't. Every single time he talks about what's happening in Ukraine, he talks about the number of people who have died. He thinks Putin feels the same way about war that he does, and that is wrong. Apparently, Putin is completely satisfied with the way things are going, doesn't really care about the number of Russians who have died. And there's a fundamental disconnect now between how Trump sees the situation in Ukraine and Putin sees the situation. Quite simply, Putin is okay with it the way that it is. Until Donald Trump changes the way he deals with this, I don't see things changing at any point in the future.
So Putin, we talked about this the night of the summit, Mick. Putin came in and he said, if you were in office, the war wouldn't have started. He talked about mail-in voting. I don't know what that has to do with Russia and Ukraine. But the point that night was, did Putin just show up there and tell Trump what he wanted to hear?
Sure, we all do that. I mean, people have accused Donald Trump of doing that to Xi and Putin all the time. It's part of negotiating. You don't walk into a room and immediately seek to anger the other person. That's not
so.
What
would your advice, yours, Chief of Staff? What would your advice be to him if you were to sit down with him tonight after hearing what Trump said today? You would say, Mr. President, what?
They got to go back to scratch. The status quo is satisfactory to Putin. They have to change the calculation now, whether that's through sanctions, whether that's through military action. I don't think sanctions work. They haven't worked for now. They have to decide what they want. Do they want the war to end, or do they care if the war ends? But doing what they're doing now is not going to move the needle one way or the other. Vladimir Putin is entirely happy with the way things are, and until Donald Trump does something different, that's not going to change.
General, you think the mistake was made on September 3rd?
I do. The 50-day deadline from the middle of July expired on that day. The very severe consequences never came as a result of that. And the problem is that the moment you allow a deadline to pass and you allow malign activity to continue, your credibility diminishes and you allow further malign activity. And that's what we've been seeing for the last couple of weeks.
So the same question with Mick is, if you were telling the commander-in-chief, okay, here's what we have to do, the answer is what?
The answer is that the only language that Putin understands are strengths, costs, consequences, and threats, primarily economic. And if we don't start leveraging those, then Putin, like Mick said, is perfectly satisfied with the status quo continuing.
Mick, I found it interesting that the president today talked about oil, right? And this is what we've heard out of him. I don't know how many days now, but let's just call it for the last week or so. Here's what he said, and I want to get both of your reactions on the other side.
Very simply, if the price of oil comes down, Putin's going to drop out. He's going to have no choice. He's going to drop out of that war. And when I found out that the European nations were buying oil from Russia, and as you know, I'm very close to India, I said, I sanctioned them. China is paying a very large tariff right now to the United States. But I'm willing to do other things, but not when the people that I'm fighting for are buying oil from Russia.
Is that, I don't know that the word I would use is solution, but is that sort of the next step of, okay, now try this?
No, that's been going on for the last 6 months. You can go back and find Donald Trump talking 6 months ago, when he came into office, talking about how do we get oil down to $40 a barrel. There was a domestic component to that. Yes, it was. We make gas cheaper for the United States, get inflation under control. But it was also designed in part to try and bankrupt the Russians so that they could not financially afford to keep the war. It's one of the reasons he's so upset with the Indians, so upset with the Chinese, because he feels like they're giving the Russians the economic lifeline. This goes back, by the way, Donald Trump lived through and was a child of the Cold War and knows that we beat the Soviet Union by bankrupting them. He's trying to do the same thing. This is not new. It just hasn't worked. To the general's point, once you lose credibility, and they have because of those deadlines, because they've talked about it now without doing anything for a long time, it's really hard to reestablish that.
I guess to my point, Mick, not that it's new, I've heard Trump talk about it more. I guess I should have said in the recent days, this concept of oil. Do you think Mick's onto something here?
I do. I think even the Russian central bank has been acknowledging that their economic situation is dismal and the future is bleak. And we need to start leveraging economic means to increase the cost to Putin so that he realizes it is in his best interest to stop the war.
Mick, if you want to leave our audience with one thing you think they should know tonight, it's what?
You're not going to get a deal at a table until people think they're better off at the table than they are in the field. And right now, Putin feels like he's better off in the field. Until they change that, there's not going to be any progress on ending this war.
By the way, on the oil front, China, India, the EU, and Turkey, the largest, I know the EU is not a nation, but the largest group of countries buying Russian oil. Mick, live tonight in our Concord Public Bureau. Mick, thank you. General Teichert, thanks for being with us tonight here in studio. Appreciate it. All right, still to come. Other side of the break. It's been 4 years since this. You remember that scene, the chaotic exit from Afghanistan. But today, President Trump made this surprise announcement.
We're trying to get it back, by the way. Okay, that could be a little breaking news. We're trying to get it back because they need things from us. We want that base back.
Why the president wants to retake Bagram in Afghanistan and what China has to do with all of it. Plus, Kamala Harris making a revelation today about her 2024 vice presidential pick. Do you think she actually wanted Tim Walz? Why today she revealed, nope. My goodness, how about that when we return?
U.S. Marshals! Exclusive access with the U.S. Marshals.
We hear the suspect is now in custody.
Laura Ingle rides along, going behind the scenes, violent fugitives, felony warrants, and the manpower it takes. Tonight on Banfield, 10/9 Central.
President Trump landing back here in the U.S. after his trip to the U.K., but it was earlier today during his meeting with the Prime Minister that the president voiced his desire to retake control of Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan.
We're going to leave Afghanistan, but we're going to leave it with strength and dignity. And we're going to keep Bagram, the big air base, one of the biggest air bases in the world. We gave it to them for nothing. We're trying to get it back, by the way. Okay, that could be a little breaking news. We're trying to get it back because they need things from us. We want that base back. But one of the reasons we want the base is, as you know, it's an hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons.
You might remember the scenes of the U.S. military withdrawing from Afghanistan and the air base following the collapse of the Afghanistan government in 2021. Very soon after Bagram was abandoned, the Taliban would take control of the air base. And then there's the president's former opponent, the one who wanted to become the commander-in-chief. In Kamala Harris's new book, 107 Days, she reportedly divulges that her first choice for a running mate was the then Department of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. According to The Atlantic, Harris writes in her new book, quote, "We were already asking a lot of America to accept a woman, a black woman married to a Jewish man. Part of me wanted to say, screw it, let's just do it. But knowing what was at stake, it was too big of a risk. And I think Pete also knew that, to our mutual sadness." Full panel here with me now on all of this. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor. Jessica Anderson, former budget official in the first Trump administration. Lindsey Granger back with me, co-host of Rising on the Hill. And Bill McGinley back with us, former cabinet secretary in the first Trump administration. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. I was like, who wants to go first? And everyone threw a finger.
Everybody pointed at me to talk to this issue.
I turned my finger. I went here.
On Kamala Harris, her basically saying today a couple things. One, Tim Walz wasn't my first choice. And it leads me to the question, is she essentially saying there that America's too intolerant?
Yeah, I just think that this table is probably very forward-thinking, and we all can say, sure, this would be great to do. But I'm thinking that America, and the way that we are in the middle of trying to repeal same-sex marriage ruling that's actually on the table for the Supreme Court, we are not as forward-thinking as we think. And you know, under President Obama, he had switched his idea about same-sex marriage. Many Democrats were aligned with his idea that same-sex marriage should not be legalized. And he changed and the country started to sway. So to pretend like we're at a place where we would have had this first black woman president, which I would have liked, and this first vice president gay man, which I would have liked, is I don't think where the country's at when they close the voting booth and are behind that by themselves making their decision.
But the majority of Americans have demonstrated that they're not ready for a black woman. They haven't demonstrated they're not ready for a gay vice president. But two women have run against Trump, and he's beaten both of them. Yes, America is not who we want her to be. America is who she is. And in this particular case, everything, when you're running for president or running for a city council, you put everything in the mix because voters, right, vote their prejudices, if you will. And as a result, there are vast parts of this country who find sexual orientation as well as the color of my skin offensive, and they vote. And so you have to put everything in the mix. No, we are not tolerant enough to have that on the ticket.
Everything in the mix, though, also includes policies.
Yeah.
I guess that would be the other.
And on policy, as she says, on policy, Buttigieg would have been a great vice presidential candidate. But there again, there are big parts of America who wouldn't be ready to vote for someone gay to be vice president.
People actually think that Buttigieg is fairly moderate. So I think that he probably would have been somebody that would have related to the state of America.
I know two people on the panel who would not have voted for Buttigieg.
Jessica? This feels like revisionist history. Yeah, I proudly voted for Trump twice. Three times, actually, if you count all three. Look, I think this feels like a little bit of revisionist history. She was the presidential candidate. She could make the choice. If she wanted him there with her, she could have forced that through and done it. I think what she realized is that she had less than 1%. In the Democratic primary, Buttigieg did not have the support of the people, and she needed someone from a swing state that she thought was going to get her across the finish line with working class. Remember, Waltz was out there in his camo trying to be working class. It didn't work. It's revisionist history.
Well, it could be both, though. You wouldn't disagree with that, would you? It could be both.
I think in this case, it's revisionist history, though. If she wanted it, she would have done it.
I think that passage that you read spoke more about Kamala Harris as a candidate and an office holder than it did about America. If Kamala Harris was a courageous candidate and really wanted to say that she wanted to change America, she wouldn't have cared what people thought. She would have stood her ground and gone out and done bold things. But instead, if you remember from the campaign, she couldn't even do an interview alone. I mean, she had to stage everything. She was a horrible candidate, and she didn't even win the primary. But Biden backed out, and they forced her into that slot for 107 days. I think back, and this is one of the things I always think about. One of my heroes is Jackie Robinson. Okay. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball. You look at the abuse he took to change baseball in America forever. If Kamala Harris was a courageous candidate she could have done a similar
Well,
thing.
But we're not talking about baseball.
107
Hold
days.
on.
So that
Hold on. We're not talking about baseball. We're talking about a presidential election. All that matters is winning.
She was horrible on policy. Horrible on
policy. You can have all that.
I want to get Lindsay. Go.
So if she actually runs this time, she's going to have a full campaign season, not 107 days. And who she chooses is going to fall largely on her policies and every single thing else. But when you are at a crunch time and have no decision to make, and you already have been sidelined by the entire party because they want Biden in the place, and we all knew that that was a bad idea.
You suggested that she could be running again. She's already gone after Joe Biden, gone after, in a sense, Tim Walz.
You're saying she's not going to run again?
I don't know, but what I'm saying is she's going after a lot of people in her own
yes,
party.
Yes, because she missed the opportunity to do that. I think that the entire thing was a disaster. I've been very public on that and going back to how this all played out. But now you have to distance yourself. You cannot be the same person that says...
You all keep talking around the issue. Listen, this is a campaign. You know how you win a campaign? You get one more vote than the next guy, right? So everything goes in the mix. If she didn't believe she could win with Buttigieg, no matter how much she liked him on paper, she's going to go with someone else.
How do you think Tim Walz feels?
He doesn't feel offended. He does not feel good.
No, well, he doesn't mind not being the first. He was the second, and he ran with her. So what's he mad about?
Losing.
Bagram, other issue. The current commander-in-chief, Jessica. President Trump on the world stage today abroad in the UK press conference, and he basically says we're trying to get Bagram back.
Yeah.
The significance there is what?
This is a big deal. So Bagram Air Base sits at a very strategic neighborhood in the world. You've got China to its west, and you have Iran to its east. So it's important from a standpoint of peace through strength for the region, which Trump is very, very much committed to. So I think the signaling that they want to get it back not only is political, because it's something valuable that Biden lost with the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, but it's strategic because it sends peace through strength in the region where there is a lot of hot conflict with both China and Iran. And again, on the China point, remember, if they have to pay attention to America on their west, that means they're not as focused on Taiwan, which is on their east coast.
I think my colleague misspoke about Biden giving up that air base. In February of 2020, Donald Trump's first administration cut a deal with the Taliban to withdraw in 2 years. As part of that deal, he gave up that Bagram Air Force Base, did not say anything about it in the written agreement. Now, Biden, it was disastrous how we came out, but how we came out was rooted in a deal that Donald Trump cut, and he gave up that air base.
But he got something for that deal, and that was not honored by Biden.
Now he wants to go back and get Bagram.
With the withdrawal and the 13 service members that were killed.
Well, he should have negotiated that in.
The totality of
Biden should have.
No, Trump did. It was too late by then.
The totality of all this started under Trump, ended under Biden. Yeah. What's the significance here?
Look, I think that Trump wants that strategic airbase back. I think we need it for our national security, both with respect to China and Iran, and I think he's going to make a deal and get that back. And I think it's going to be critically important that he's successful in doing it, and I have a lot of faith in his team, from Secretary Rubio and everybody else. This is going to happen.
And I disagree. As much as you guys can name all the reasons why it's close to China, the real significance is that this was a failure for Biden. So any failure for Biden that he can continue to bring up is another win for him. And he's not actually having policies that are causing the economy to go up. He's not actually pulling or ending the Russia and Ukraine war. He's not actually doing anything that he said he was going to do. So this will be a win to point back to a Biden
put
loss.
American boots on the ground? When you get it back? You're going to put American boots, going to put 100,000 soldiers back at that Air Force base surrounded by the Taliban?
He hasn't indicated that.
Yeah.
Well, he says he wants it back.
I don't think he's indicated that or wants boots on the ground. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. You were not my second, third, or fourth choice.
Thanks for choosing.
I was about to ask.
You've always been my first choice.
Good to have you guys. I appreciate it. All right, still to come here on the Hill. As Congress tackles UFO transparency, did you know something on this front happened 52 years ago today involving an American president? I'll explain and a look at what's trending on the other side. Some of the stories right now trending on thehill.com. First one, the president on Air Force One right now on his way back to the U.S. after that two-day trip across the pond, capped off with a press conference today in London. How about this? A judge orders Mahmoud Khalil to be deported to Algeria or Syria. He was the former Columbia University student. And then there's this. Starbucks workers sue over dress code. They want to be reimbursed, some of these workers, for the cost of clothes to work there. It's just getting expensive out there, as we all know. To check out those stories and more, all you have to do is head on over to thehill.com, or you could scan that QR code, by the way. That brings us to the Hill newsletters. I write for the Morning Report every day. You can find me there every morning in your inbox. All right, time for my take now. And as we head out on this September 18th, did you know that the governor of Georgia on this date in 1973, 52 years ago, made some news of his own? The governor filed a report with the International UFO Bureau saying he had witnessed a gigantic moon-shaped, color-changing object that 10 to 12 people also saw. That governor, of course, Jimmy Carter. And just a handful of years later, President Carter would occupy the Oval Office. So that was then. Fast forward to just last week, Capitol Hill, a bipartisan group of lawmakers, holding the latest hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena. The video stealing the show, this right here, a metallic orb off the coast of Yemen withstanding the strike of a Hellfire missile. Congressman Eric Burleson came on this show shortly after he released that.
A lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resources being put into the UAP phenomenon. And I think we owe it to the American taxpayer, to the people that own this government, some answers.
Now, consider this. Many of the lawmakers on that committee, like Burleson, hadn't even been born by September of 73. So whether it's the lawmakers of today or even a future president back then, most would agree that over 50 years later, the questions of what did we just see are still very much floating around.